Welcome, everyone, to Heritage Kitchener meeting for March 2025. And I'm really pleased to find that we have new members with us today. And I'd like to give our new members, two of them, a chance to introduce themselves and just tell us your name, and perhaps, if you want to, tell us if you live in a heritage house or district, or, you know, why you thought it was a good idea to join the committee. So it doesn't have to be long, but let's hear it. All right, I'm going to start over here on this side.
Was I pressed it on?
Oh, and if you don't mind speaking into the mic, I'll be able to hear you better, and so will everybody else. Thank you.
For sure. My name is Nicolette. You can all call me Nick. I am a lifelong Kitchener resident. Currently, I'm living in the kind of Highland and Patricia area near Belmont. I don't live in a heritage home at the moment, but I'm familiar with a number of them kind of around my neighborhood, not too far from the Joseph Schneider House. And I did spend a number of years in Waterloo region. After graduating high school, I stayed in the region and I went to the University of Waterloo, where I completed an undergraduate and a graduate degree in history, which is why I decided to join the committee.
Thank you very much, Nick. That's a nice overview. And welcome. And over on my right, your left, whichever, we have Preston. So please introduce yourself. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean. Hi, I'm Preston, lifelong history buff and now professional. I live in the Odd neighborhood now, so a real smattering of historical architectural styles from the 19th century up to the 1960s. So I enjoy walking around there and checking out the different styles. And now I work as a cultural heritage specialist with a firm in town doing heritage evaluations and drafting some of the types of statements that we have a look at in committees like this. So that's a little overview.
Thank you very much, Preston. Welcome. So now we'll proceed with the agenda. And the first item, second item on the agenda is disclosure of a pecuniary interest or general nature thereof. Are there any pecuniary interests? Seeing none, thank you. We will go to our number 3, which is delegations, and I have none registered at this time, and I don't see any in the audience. Thank you. So we'll proceed then with 4.1, which is the Heritage Permit Application, 21 St. Ledger Street, repairs and reconstruction of the porch. Jessica, and I neglected to introduce two new committee members. We have 3 heritage planners with us. Today we have 2, Jessica Vera and Michelle Drake, and each have determined which item they will present. So Jessica, we'll let you do a presentation then on this porch repair, reconstruction, 21 St. Ledger, please.
Thank you, Jean. So as mentioned, the item on the agenda is a heritage permit application for 21 St. Ledger Street, designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located within the Civic Centre Neighbourhood Heritage Conservation District. The HCD plan identifies this property as being District Significance C. So the work proposed today includes a reconstruction of a front porch on the property. The former porch was in an advanced state of disrepair and had to be taken down due to safety concerns. The applicant is proposing a new porch, which is in a style that is more in keeping with the architectural style of the home, and it includes features such as a faux gable at the entrance, tapered columns, cedar shingle skirts, and up above on the balcony, a glass guardrail. In reviewing the merits of this application, the former porch, which is now removed, was not original to the existing home, and it was not suited for the design of the home. The new porch is more in keeping with the Berlin vernacular style. The materials proposed include brick pillars and tapered wood columns and is compatible with the existing home and the surrounding HCD in general. And further, it's not anticipated to negatively impact either the subject property, the surrounding streetscape, or the HCD as a whole. In conclusion, it's recommended that pursuant to Section 42 of the Ontario Heritage Act, this heritage permit HPA 2020, sorry, that was a mistype, it should be 2025 V01, be approved to permit porch repairs and reconstruction at the property municipally addressed as 21 St. Ledger in accordance with the supplementary information submitted with this application and subject to the following condition. 1, that the building permit be removed and reviewed and heritage clearance provided by heritage planning staff prior to the issuance of the building permit. And that concludes this presentation.
Thank you, Jessica. I understand we have a delegation on this property. The property owner, thank you. Would you like to come forward? If you'll take your place there at the mic and speak into the mic. And your name is Monica. Maybe you can tell us the whole name, please.
Sure. My name's Monica Weber. I'm one of the homeowners of 21 St. Ledger.
Please proceed.
Well, we would like to report, we need to replace the derelict porch that is attached, well, no longer attached to our house. We've tried to put together a proposal that is in keeping with the neighborhood, in keeping with the quality of our home, and yeah, would be much safer than what is there currently.
Thank you very much for coming in, and perhaps the committee would have questions for you, if you're all right with that.
Certainly.
Are there any questions for the delegation? Yes, Natalie.
So just judging by the photos, the actual house itself, that window on the downstairs does have like the rounded top, but then on the sketch, it looks a little bit just more square, no rounded top. Will that remain, or is the window going to be replaced to accommodate the new porch?
The windows are going to stay the way they are. Yeah. With the arch top, we've already repaired the masonry around it, so we want to keep it the way it is.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you. Are there any other questions for the delegation?
Yeah,
Yes, Councillor Chapman.
yeah, I just, following up a bit on what Natalie said, and that the photo, I don't see any extension on the sort of back left-hand side of the house, but on the diagram where you're showing the new porch, there seems to be this extension. Is that already there, or is that something you're adding?
That's something we were proposing to add, but at this point, I'm getting, we haven't received enough information from the council to know what we can do under the Growing Together plan. So that's the kitchen porch. I would love to replace and enclose that. But at this point, we're really focused on getting the permits for the front porch.
Okay,
And we'll have to we have to table that other side extension for later, but this isn't actually for that.
okay.
As far as I understand.
Yeah,
We're just discussing the front.
right, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Any other questions for the delegation? Thank you then, and as we understand, it's primarily with the front porch. So all right, I'll continue. It appears that we're ready to make a motion, and I will read it, that further to Section 42 of the Ontario Heritage Act, Heritage Permit Application HPA 2024 V 2022-001 be approved to permit porch repairs and reconstruction of the property municipally addressed as 21 St. Ledger Street in accordance with the supplementary information submitted with this application and subject to the following condition: that the final building permit be reviewed and heritage clearance be provided by heritage planning staff prior to the issuance of the building permit. Would someone make the recommendation, please? Move the motion. Thank you, Lauren. Are there any further questions of staff on the motion? All right. Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion? Carried unanimously. So, since this report received approval from the committee, it will be processed under delegated approval authority. Our next item, 4.2, notice of intention to designate 78-81 St. George Street, DSD 2025-055. And Michelle Drake, our heritage planner, will make a presentation. Michelle?
Through the chair. Before I start the presentation, for the purposes of the committee, as I know there are new members, I thought I would just mention that this particular item and the next item are called notices of intention to designate. They start or potentially start a formal process under the Ontario Heritage Act. But for the benefit of our new members, so that you're aware, we do start with an informal process, which you'll hear more about later today. And so this property has been before Heritage Kitchener once before in the fall. Heritage Kitchener did recommend that staff proceed to prepare the notice to designate. We did hear back from the property owner, and they did not have concerns with the proposed designation. So just a bit of background, as I mentioned, for those members who are new, that this committee did previously receive some information about the property, and now tonight we are presenting the formal notice of intention to designate for consideration by this committee and then potentially by council. So the property before us is 79-81 St. George Street. It's situated on the south side of St. George Street between Peter Street and Hebel Place in the Cedar Hill Schneider Creek neighborhood cultural heritage landscape. And the property meets 4 of the 9 criteria for designation. And as a small reminder, again, as I know we have new members this evening, the Act requires a property to meet a minimum of 2 of 9 criteria. This particular property is recognized for its design physical, historical associative, as well as its contextual value. In terms of its design value, it is a rare example of a late 19th century semi-detached building, as well as a representative example of the Italian architectural style. The building is in good condition. It is 2 stories in height and features a square plan, hipped roof, and a 1-story rear addition with 2 enclosed verandas. The historical associative value relates to the direct associations with the theme of early development and housing typologies, and more specifically, the semi-detached dwelling housing typology. In Berlin, now Kitchener, the Berliner Journal documented building progress in the 1870s and referred to semi-detached dwellings as 2-family dwellings, houses built for 2 residences, or double houses. The semi-detached building typology was rare, with less than 2 dozen being constructed between 1878 and 1903. This property, 79 to 81 St. George Street, was documented as a 6 semi-detached dwelling built in Berlin, and it was built by a John Sage as a 2-story brick house set up as a 2-family dwelling for a cost of $2,000 in the South Ward. The semi-detached dwelling typology was an early demonstration of multiple dwellings, which were not common in Ontario, but that could blend into the existing single detached dwelling stock due to similarities in plan, massing, and design. Oh. Mariah, my apologies, I've done something. Oh. The contextual value relates to the location, orientation, massing, and setback of the building, which help to define and maintain the consistent street edge, similar building setbacks on the south side of St. George Street. In addition, the orientation, massing, setback, design, and materials contribute to the continuity and character of the St. George Street streetscape and the Cedar Hill Schneider Creek cultural heritage landscape. The building is in its original location, providing a physical, visual, and historic link to its surroundings, namely the St. George Street streetscape and the Cedar Hill Schneider Creek neighborhood cultural heritage landscape. The recommendation before the committee this evening is to designate pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act that the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 79 to 81 St. George Street as being of cultural heritage value or interest. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Michelle. Are there any, oh, I'm sorry. Do we have any delegations here? Seeing none. Do we have any questions for staff on this particular property? Yes, Magda?
I was just wondering, with regards to additional criteria in the SOS, the interior is marked as, the response is no. To the question, is the interior arrangement, finish, craftsmanship, and/or detail noteworthy? I was just wondering if that was actually evaluated as part of the research.
Through the chair, between the process of bringing the initial report to Heritage Kitchener and where we are today, the property actually was up for sale, and there were quite a number of photographs available for us to review. And based on those, I did feel that there was not anything that we would likely pursue designation for. I'll also mention that although we are permitted to designate interior features, we generally only designate interior features with the permission of the property owner. So it kind of depends on the significance of the property, and then working with the property owner, acknowledging that buildings evolve over time, and particularly in the interior, sometimes those changes are more permanent than perhaps things that happen on the exterior.
Thank you for the question. Any others? Seeing none. I'm now going to proceed to the resolution. And if this receives approval, it will go to council for approval then April 7th, 2025. So the resolution, that pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 7981 St. George Street as being of cultural heritage value or interest. And who would like to move the motion? Thank you, Natalie. Any other questions? All those in favor? So it goes to council April 7th. Thank you very much. Next item, 4.3, is another notice of intention to designate 1434 Trustler Road. Michelle Drake will present, please.
Through the chair. Again, this is another property that the committee did see once before. This particular property is municipally addressed as 1434 Trustler Road. It's located on the east side of Trustler Road between Bleams Road and Huron Road in the city of Kitchener. This particular property meets 4 out of the 9 criteria for designation. And as I mentioned earlier, the requirement is a minimum of 2 criteria. The property demonstrates design physical value as a rare and early example of a mid-19th century 1.5 story frame house constructed with lath and horsehair covered with stucco, while the circa 1910 2.5 story Queen Anne house is a rare example of a construction method that used a machine to cut an exterior withe of rock-faced concrete block to clad the wood frame construction beneath. The property further demonstrates design physical value as a rare and early example of mixed architectural styles. Together, the original house and the addition provide a unique example of how a single house composed of 2 structures of radically different styles and dates can still work together. The barn also has physical value as an early example of a barn, including its solid construction. In terms of historical and associative value, there was quite a lengthy description in your staff report. So today I'm just going to provide a brief overview. The property was originally part of the German company tract Lot 136. This lot was initially owned by the Brubaker family and sold to Oliver Clemens in the 1853. He was associated with and established the Blair Woolen Mills in 1875. Later, the property was purchased by, and I may not get this right, the Lautenschlager family. Jacob purchased the property in 1864. He was associated with the New Dundee Creamery. He was also a descendant of missionaries, and his son, Roy, credits the mother for the design of the 1910 edition. The property is also associated with the Getling family, which was purchased by Albert in 1916, who was a member of the Roseville Church and also associated with the founding of the New Dundee Creamery. To my knowledge, based on Vernon's directories, the property remains in the Getling family today. In terms of contextual value, it possesses rural character. So the specific elements that maintain that rural character include the layout of the buildings, the long tree-lined laneway terminating at the farm complex with the house on one side and the barn on the other, the south-facing orientation of the house towards the lane, the location of the house within the grove of trees, the undulating topography along with agricultural fields, hedgerows, and forests. The contextual value also relates to how the heritage attributes are physically, visually, functionally, and historically linked to that rural character of the property and the area. It is my recommendation this evening that pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, that the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 1434 Trustler Road as being of cultural heritage value or interest. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Michelle. Do we have any questions for staff? Yes, please.
So again, similar to my last question. It's about the interior. Is it like if the interior is sort of marked as significant and aspects of it are marked for designation, does that mean that there has been recent confirmation of these interior attributes? I'm just asking because the report sort of mentioned several times that in 1991 the interior was like this, and I was just wondering if there was any more recent sort of confirmation that those features do still in fact exist. Thank you.
Through the chair, the way the statement of significance was drafted was I did not identify any interior features as heritage attributes because we have not had access to the property since 1991. There have been requests to the property owner for access, but we have not received any responses from the property owner. So we're not able to confirm whether those interior attributes are still present. Had access been required and had there been an agreement to that some are of value and that there was agreement to conserve them, then it likely would have added to the design and physical value aspect of the property.
Thank you, and I'll backtrack. I do not see any delegations here, but just in case there is, seeing none, I will then, and are there any further questions of staff? Yes, Laura.
It's okay. Through the chair, given the historical significance of the property's past owners and their contributions to the region's agricultural and industrial development, are there plans to incorporate any interpretive signage or educational initiatives to enhance public awareness of the site's heritage value? Thank you.
Through the chair, often as part of various application types, whether that be a planning application or a heritage application, we may consider the requirement for some form of storytelling through commemorative plaques and signage or bronze plaques and such. At this point, there is no consideration for that type of signage or commemoration at the property at this time.
Thank you, Laura and Michelle. I think that's worthy of note for our records, that we know that development will continue on, and this probably will be surrounded by new development. And I think we should note in our minutes that I'm assuming that as a committee, we would like to see some form of interpretation should development take place in that area.
I agree. Thank you.
Yes, Grant.
Thank you. And through the chair, I just had a quick question to staff. I was curious if this property was inside the urban boundary.
Through the chair, no, this property is not inside the urban boundary.
Is it within the Southwest Kitchener lands that are subject to further policy?
Through the chair, to the best of my knowledge, it is not in those lands either.
Thank you very much for the questions. We'll proceed then to the resolution that pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 1434 Trussler Road as being of cultural heritage, value, or interest. Who will move the recommendation? Grant will. All those in favor? And this report then will go to Council for approval April the 7th, 2025. And now, 4.4, status updates, Bill 23, Municipal Heritage Register review, DSD 2025-031. Michelle, would you like to make a presentation then? I see you're noted for that. And also, there seems to be a difference in the address, west and east and so on. So I assume you'll clarify that up.
Through the chair, that is correct. I believe the report referred to 241 to 247 Duke Street East, and that was incorrect. It is Duke Street West. So the municipal address for this particular property is 241 to 247 Duke Street West, as well as 55 Victoria Street North, as it is located on a corner. Again, to just reiterate what I mentioned a little earlier this evening, so our Municipal Heritage Register review work starts with an informal process, and this is an example of our informal process. So there has been a field evaluation of the property. There has been additional archival research done by staff, and that information is being presented to Heritage Kitchener this evening. And we would be seeking your direction to proceed with the formal steps that are outlined in the Ontario Heritage Act. And that first step would be the notice of intention to designate. So you would see this property come back to the committee should you give staff the direction to proceed with the notice and the formal steps of the process. So with respect to this property, 241 to 247 Duke Street West and 55 Victoria Street North, the property is being proposed for designation. And this is because it does meet 5 of the 9 criteria, and that they fall under the design physical, the historical associative, and the contextual value. On this slide, you can see a historic image of the property. I felt it was important to include because during my evaluation, I initially didn't think that the longer elevation, which is the elevation that faces Victoria Street, that the windows were original because they're sort of higher up and they're not as, I guess, square, to use a simple term, which is not necessarily characteristic of what we've seen in other industrial vernacular buildings. But in fact, that photo shows that those, and it's hard to see with the busyness of the street, but those smaller, more rectangular window openings were in fact original to the site, or to the building, I should say. So when we do our Municipal Heritage Register review, what we do is we present to the committee this table with the 9 criteria and whether or not the property meets the criteria along with a description. So for 241 to 247 Duke Street West, we did conclude that it does possess design and physical value. And that's because it's a representative example of an early 20th century vernacular industrial architecture in Berlin, or now Kitchener. The original 1913 portion of the building features elements of early vernacular industrial architecture, including the flat roof, the buff yellow brick, appears to be painted around 2019, a regular arrangement of windows, and minimal ornamentation. Decorative features, although minimal, include horizontal brick banding under the cornice, as well as above the foundation, dentils under the cornice band, and brick pilasters that separate the door and window openings. There was an addition constructed after 1925 on the east side of the building, which would be the Duke Street elevation that replicates the mass setback roofline as well as the rhythm with the pilasters of the original building. The property also meets criteria 4. The historical associative value of the property relates to its connection to commercial development in the city during the early part of the 20th century. The first building was occupied in 1913 by John Slow and Company, a wholesale grocer and one of only 2 such companies in Berlin at the time. The location was important given its proximity to the railway spur line that at the time ran along Victoria Street North and enabled easy transport of produce to the warehouse. John Slow & Co. was a Toronto company that operated several wholesale grocery outlets throughout Ontario in the early 1900s. Victor Sloan, a son of John Sloan, was a resident of the city of Kitchener and served as the office manager and later accountant of the wholesale business. In 1920, John Slow and Company was purchased its sole local wholesale competitor, the Randall and Roos Wholesale Grocer and Liquor Warehouse, which had dated back to 1884. Later that same year, John Slow & Co. was purchased by National Grocers. By 1950, National Grocers had moved to a new property and was later consolidated with the Loblaws Companies, the largest food retailer in Canada. The historical associative value of the property also relates to the connection of the building to the well-known local electrical and lighting company called Bergen Electric Limited and its owner, Robert William Bergen. Robert was an electrician who owned and operated several electrical contracting companies from 1921, including the R.W. Beerwagen Electric Company, the Mattel and Beerwagen Electric Company, and the Bergen Electric Company. Robert Bergen purchased this property from the Sloan Estate in the 50s, and he helped form the Ontario Electrical Contractors Association, which encouraged local farmers to use hydro instead of coal oil at their farms. Continuing on with the historical and associative value for criteria 6, I think that is. My apologies, my eyesight is not that great. The building reflects the work of an architect, Charles Knechtel, who was significant to Berlin. Charles was the son of Jonas Knechtel, whom he acquired most of his building and design knowledge from between 1886 and 1894. He opened his own business in 1895 and operated until 1930. Over 100 buildings were designed by him, including churches, commercial blocks, factories, homes, schools, etc. In 1913, he built a large warehouse on Victoria Street for John Slow and Company. Other notable buildings he designed in Kitchener include the First Church of Christ Scientist, the Victoria Park Pavilion, the Berlin Carnegie Library, the Heman Hardware Company Limited building, and the St. Mary's Roman Catholic Church Rectory. And then lastly, with respect to the contextual value, the building plays a role in maintaining and supporting the character of the Warehouse District Cultural Heritage Landscape, which was identified in Kitchener's Cultural Heritage Landscape Study. The Warehouse District CHL, which roughly encompasses the complex of industrial buildings concentrated along the CNR rail line, formerly the Grand Trunk Railway, and the railway line itself was the site of the majority of the city's economic development during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Heritage attributes include a quantity of multi-story brick buildings in a vernacular industrial style with small setbacks from the street and rail line. The building at 241 to 247 Duke Street West supports these heritage values and heritage attributes through its height, mass, setback, vernacular industrial architectural style, and the original use as a warehouse. The building is historically linked to the CNR, which delivered produce and goods via spur line, which permitted freight cars to pull up directly alongside the Victoria Street North elevation of the building. So my recommendation this evening is that Heritage consider direct staff to move forward with the next step in the process. Through the chair, I know sometimes you like to vote separately, so we can either deal with the vote now, or I can do the other properties and we can deal with a vote at the end.
Since we have three, I think we'll do one at a time this time. So are there any questions? I don't see any delegations here. So are there any questions of staff about this particular property, 241, 247 Duke Street West, 55 Victoria Street North? Questions? All right. Yes, Nick, please.
Oh, sorry, there we go. I'm not used to using the microphone yet. The question would be similar to the question that was proposed about the Trustler Road property, which is, are there any plans or suggestions being made to add any kind of educational signage, especially since this is a commercial property near the downtown core as opposed to a residential area?
Through the chair, typically our main opportunity to require such type of commemoration and signage is through some type of application that's made by the property owner. As there is no application before us, there are no plans at this time. With that being said, over the years, I am aware that the committee has had an interest in often what they called like education and commemoration. And so, it could be something that's revisited in the future.
Proceed then to this particular motion. Pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, cultural heritage value or interest be recognized and designation be pursued for the following property: 241, 247 Duke Street East, 55 Victoria Street North. Who would like to move that? Grant, thank you. All those in favor of pursuing? Carried. Thank you. This will go to council for approval April 7th. And again, it's to pursue designation. All right, Michelle, I'm assuming you got the next one.
Through the chair, I'll also just clarify that what will happen now with our informal process is that I will reach out to the property owner to provide them a copy of the statement of significance along with a letter. This will be, I believe, at least their third letter in the process they'll be receiving, and a homeowner's guide to heritage designation, and asking them to contact staff to discuss the proposed designation. And then, as I mentioned earlier, then a second staff report will come back to the committee around a recommendation with respect to a formal notice of intention to designate under the Ontario Heritage Act. So the second property before you this evening is also on Duke Street. This particular property is 30 to 32 Duke Street West. I would like to mention that I did reach out to 3 of our committee members who have some architectural education and experience, and I'm grateful for the commentary that they all provided. These types of buildings can sometimes be hard to describe and hard for maybe everyone to understand, but they are definitely representative of an era of development and a style that was present during that time. So this property is there's 2 towers, although it's sort of all connected together as one. 20th century commercial office buildings that are connected by a concrete podium and a parking garage built in the international architectural style with brutalist and expressionist influences. The building is located on the corner of Duke Street West and Ontario Street North in the city commercial core. The principal resources that contribute to the heritage value are the buildings, podium, parking garage, and the exterior hardscaping. In this example, the property meets 3 of the 9 criteria for designation under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. So again, we'll go back to the table where I'll describe the criteria itself. So for criteria 1, the property demonstrates design physical value as a rare example of the international architectural style with brutalist and expressionist influences. The international architectural style is known for its use of hard angular edges, severely planed surfaces, and large expanses of glass, expressing a structural system based on a skeleton of steel or reinforced concrete. The international style often featured a flat roof, square or rectangular massing, large horizontal bands of windows, and minimal to no decoration. Landscape design was also influenced by the international architectural style, with commercial buildings designed as focal points in an artificial landscape. This often resulted in a building being built on a podium and or surrounded by a plaza, which pedestrians would cross to reach to the building towers. Historically, the international architectural style was almost exclusively used by the commercial sector during the second half of the 20th century, triggered by the prosperity of the 50s and 60s, leading to a building boom that transformed Canadian cities with the introduction of many large-scale commercial complexes of this style. In Kitchener, to the best of my knowledge, this is the only property that's been recognized for its design physical value as an example of the international style with these brutalist and expressionist influences. The international style is expressed by the flat roof, square and rectangular towers, horizontal bands of windows, podium, and plaza. Brutalist influences include the stairs and columns around the theater entrance, the north facade, parts of the east facade, the relatively maintenance-free gardens and walkways. Expressionist influences include the podium and concave concrete panels. The buildings are in good condition and have recently undergone renovations to change the use of some of the units from commercial to residential. The property features a plaza leading to a 10-story square tower on a podium that fronts Duke, a 6-story rectangular tower fronting Ontario, a parking garage, a flat roof, concrete construction, bronze double-glazed aluminum window frames, courtyards, plazas and stairs, and flower boxes, all in concrete. With respect to the concrete construction, the buildings feature these hard angular edges, as well as smooth and rough, naturally textured surfaces, precast concave concrete spandrels, concrete stairs and columns around the theater, and the concrete hardscaping of the courtyards, plazas, and flower boxes. In terms of historical associative value, the building demonstrates the work of an architect who is significant to the province, the country, and the international community. Webb Zafara Menkes Housden, Partnership of Toronto, designed the building. They were established in 1961 and are now an award-winning international partnership responsible for the design of many prominent buildings, such as the CN Tower, the Telegram Building, now the Globe and Mail headquarters, the Toronto Star Building, the Hazelton Lanes, the Crossways Complex in Toronto, the Royal Bank Building in Toronto, the Sun Life Centre in Toronto, the Elf Aquitaine Towers in Paris, the City Hall in Calgary, the Manufacturers Life Tower in Vancouver, the Bank of BC Tower in Vancouver, the Scotia Plaza Tower in Toronto, the Waterfront Park in Halifax, Canada Place in Edmonton, and Maison des Coopérants in Montreal. The property is also recognized for its contextual value, being that it is important in defining the public versus private space, and in so doing also supports the character of the area. The building design includes the concrete stairs and flower boxes that lead to a plaza in front of the main entrance to the building. These features align with the general built form setbacks on adjacent buildings fronting Duke, helping to create a street edge and rhythm as one walks along the public sidewalk on Duke. At the same time, the main floor concrete arches establish a rhythm as one walks along the public sidewalk on Ontario Street North. And again, I am recommending that the committee consider proceeding with giving staff direction to move to the next step of the process, which would be to connect with the property owner and return to the committee with a report regarding a notice of intention to designate.
Thank you, Michelle. Are there questions for staff on this one? I do not see any delegations here. Yes, Grant.
And thank you. I had a couple questions on this item, if you don't mind. Through you to staff, I was wondering how many residential conversion units are anticipated in this building, or if that would be known at this time.
Through the chair, I'm not familiar with that number, but we could definitely ask internally and circle back with you.
Excellent, thank you. I'm also wondering what the current zoning under the proposed Growing Together framework would be.
Through the chair, I also don't know that off the top of my head, but I can look into that and circle back.
Excellent. Could designation of this property impact any of the current works or outstanding building permits that are underway for the residential conversion of this property?
Through the chair, that is a good question. There are some implications with the passing of a notice of intention to designate and building permits. I would have to look into the regulations of the Act to understand the nuance of when that might create a problem, because there is a scenario where it could rescind active building permits. Through the committee, definitely that would not be the intent of us moving forward. So, if that were the case, we can consider the appropriate timing to bring it forward so that we don't impact the conversion that's undergoing today.
Thank you. Maybe just a couple more here. I was wondering if I'm not familiar with the underground parking structure of this building. Is it linked to any of the abutting properties? I know there's an office complex on at 50 Queen rather, that has a underground parkade. I'm wondering if they're linked in any way.
Through the chair, I'm also not familiar with the parking garage as I don't have access to it. To the best of my knowledge, they are not. I do have building plans that I was able to review as part of the archival work. There was nothing to suggest that anything was being connected to any other properties, but I don't know that for certain.
Alrighty, and I'll just finish off here. I was wondering, and pardon me for this might be a controversial question. I'm just curious with the process. I just want to hear from staff. If this building were to be designated, would it be able to go through demolition control, and what would that process look like if it's designated?
Through the chair, so that would be two separate processes. So if the property were designated, the applicant would need to submit a heritage permit application requesting permission to demolish that building. Typically, those types of applications must be accompanied by a heritage impact assessment that supports the demolition. And in the absence of that support, staff would typically not recommend approval of the demolition. With respect to demolition control, I may defer to Garrett, but I don't believe it would apply given the zoning of the property.
Through you, Madam Chair. So our demolition control bylaw was recently amended with the implementation of our rental replacement bylaw. So demolition control applies to all properties that have 6 or more dwelling units. So it would be applicable. They would have to satisfy heritage considerations prior to the approval or final consideration of that permit.
Are there any other questions for staff? So yes, did you have a question, Preston?
I do, yes, thank you. Just rolling back, we heard a little bit about the architectural history of the building. I was wondering in your research if you found anything on the history of the tenants of the building. Earlier for the first property, we heard about the historical significance about the various companies and entrepreneurs who had been there as part of the commercial history of Berlin and later Kitchener. I'm wondering if any of the tenants of this particular building stood out in your research, or whether it was chiefly the architectural history that was of importance.
Through the chair, one of the main tenants at the time was the Royal Bank of Canada, RBC. I was not able to determine whether or not their move to that particular building was of significance in terms of, was it their first building in the city, or did they have other properties already in play and they were consolidating? So I do know that was one of the early tenants. Other than that, it spoke about functioning on the lower levels, functioning of more a retail capacity and almost like an indoor mall. And my research did not reveal specific tenants. And then, my apologies, there was one other one it has escaped my mind. So there could very well be, the theater. The theater was designed into the building. It wasn't sort of a later thought. So I would imagine they must have had, although I could not confirm, they must have had a particular company in mind that wanted to use that space and operate the theater. I can't imagine they built that large complex just hoping someone would come and put a theater in. But good question.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Just a question.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Sorry to
Gary.
disrupt the flow. I have a response to the earlier questions from Grant. The lands are designated as Strategic Growth Area C within our official plan. They are proposed to be zoned as Strategic Growth Area 4. And were approved to be zoned Strategic Growth Area 4 as part of the implementing bylaw, which is under appeal. And the current conversion that is underway for residential is converting floors 3 to 10 from office to residential with a total of 128 units.
Any further update, questions? The question about demolition did enter the conversation here. And I don't know whether you came across what stood on that corner pre this tower, the Krug Mansion with the gardens, extensive gardens. I think it was a 36-room mansion that was meant for the Krug family, the Krug furniture factory. So it's very interesting that we hear demolition in this conversation. Even with modern architecture, I now believe our job is to say, as a committee, whether we feel this structure should be considered for heritage designation. Is that correct, staff?
Through the chair, yes, it would be to direct staff to proceed to the next step of our process, which is that formal process where we would draft a second staff report with a notice of intention to designate.
Intention. All right. So I will read the resolution. Pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the cultural heritage value or interest be recognized and designation be pursued for the following property, 30-32 Duke Street West. So who would like to move this resolution? Nick would. Thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? One opposed. But the motion is carried. And now we have 1865 Huron Road. Is that yours as well, Michelle?
Through the chair, yes, it is. Okay, so I think this is the last one for our review this evening under the Municipal Heritage Register. So this is 1865 Huron Road. It's a late 19th century building constructed in the vernacular architectural style. It's located on the north side of Huron Road between Tressler and Amon Drive in the city of Kitchener. This property was found to meet 3 of the 9 criteria, and that included design physical, historical, associative, and contextual values. And again, if we take a look at the chart with the different criteria, for criteria 1, the design and physical value relates to the age, material, and method of construction. The west wing of the farmhouse is a rare example of a strapped log construction, while the east wing is a representative example of lath construction. The building features log and lath construction, side gables with a medium pitch, whose roof ridges form a T intersection. Clapboard siding, which was covered by insul brick and then aluminum. Symmetrical window placements, original door and window openings, including the round window opening on the east elevation, which is something that has been unique in the southwest area of the city. Veranda with a hip roof on the south. Original interior baseboards were mentioned, as well as casings and doors. Given the questions asked earlier tonight, I will just say that is based on historic reports. We have not had a recent opportunity to review the interior of the building. Those reports also indicate that the date inscribed on the plaster wall is 1885. The property has historical associative value because it has direct associations with the theme of early pioneer settlement, early pioneer farming, and pioneer settlers Abraham Cressman. The lands are part of Bechtel's tract. George Bechtel bought 3,150 acres of land from Richard Beasley on July 18, 1800, which came to be known as Bechtel's Tract. This tract is in southern Kitchener and generally extends from the Grand River west to the Wilmot Township, and once included the villages of German Mills and Strasbourg. The property was once part of a larger lot that was originally owned by Abraham Cressman around 1861. The property has a historic associative value because it has direct associations with the Salins family. The property was purchased by James Henry Salins in 1924. He was a local blacksmith, and according to local history, he moved an old pig stable from Strasbourg to his property and converted it to his blacksmith shop. He was known for making horseshoes, sleighs, and farm wagons. The blacksmith shop no longer exists. He was a member of the Rosebank Brethren in Christ Church, and his wife, Lucy Rosenblatt, together with his wife, they had 8 children. Their youngest child was Willard Lewis Salins, and Willard operated a farm machinery business called Salins Equipment Limited. The location was nearby at 1876 Huron Road and operated for over 30 years. In 1985, Salins Equipment became the biggest farm machinery dealership in Eastern Canada for the Dutz Alis Chalmers Manufacturing Company, and Willard was recognized across North America as well as within the tractor pulling community for his skill at announcing and judging at various competitions. From a contextual value perspective, the building is oriented towards the street and in close proximity to Huron Road, which would have been connected to its earlier use as a blacksmith shop and other later commercial uses. The property is also visually connected to 1876 Huron Road on the south side of the road, west of the subject property. That property was initially, as I mentioned, owned by the Salins family for farm machinery. I'm not sure if it still is in the family, but it is still a farm machinery business across the street. So my recommendation this evening for the committee is to provide direction to staff to move forward with the next steps. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Michelle. Are there questions for staff on this particular property? Laura?
Through the chair, my apologies if I missed it, but who is the current owner of the property?
Through the chair, we don't typically reference current owners as that is information protected for privacy reasons. I didn't research, the research I did not confirm who the current owner was.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, we will then proceed to the recommendation. Pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the cultural heritage value or interest be recognized and designation be pursued for 1865 Huron Road. Who would like to move this? Thank you, Natalie. All those in favor? Unanimously. Thank you. And now we'll move to item 5, the information item. It is the work plan for 2025. And I was pleased to see that we are going to be working on and looking at cultural heritage landscapes. So Diksha perhaps did this one, or Jessica. Jessica is going to do the presentation on it, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the next few slides, we wanted to introduce our intended work plan for 2025. In addition to our usual work reviewing heritage permits, heritage impact assessments, and so on, we are anticipating 3 bodies of work to be undertaken this year by heritage planning staff in conjunction with Heritage Kitchener. These 3 bodies of work are the official plan update, including a review of the heritage policies, the implementation of cultural heritage landscapes, and the continuation of our Municipal Heritage Register review project. So to provide a brief crash course on what exactly an official plan is and why we need to update it, an official plan, commonly referred to as an OP because we in planning love our acronyms, is a policy document which shapes the way a city grows and develops. A provincial law called the Planning Act sets out what exactly an OP can do, including directing growth and change, mostly related to how land and buildings are used, guiding decisions on land use, development, transportation, infrastructure, and so on, implementing the city's vision on how it wants to grow, and also providing direction for implementation tools like our zoning bylaw. So the diagram on the right shows the hierarchy of policy frameworks in Ontario. At a provincial level, as previously mentioned, we have the Planning Act, which informs then the provincial planning statement. Then at the local levels, we have the regional official plan. This is now changing due to the transition of regional planning responsibilities to the municipalities. And then next we have our official plan, and then that leads into our zoning bylaw, as well as other tools like community plans or secondary plans. Now, this is a simplified diagram because planning activities are also governed and guided by other provincial statutes like the Ontario Heritage Act and other municipal frameworks such as the Heritage Conservation District, but this gives some understanding of where our official plans sort of sit generally within our planning framework within Ontario. So the existing City of Kitchener official plan was adopted in 2014. A new OP is needed to respond to current and future conditions and trends within the city, and this update is known as Kitchener 2051. This work began in 2024 with the undertaking of different technical studies. As part of the process to update and develop our new OP, we are going to take a comprehensive look at our existing heritage policy framework. Our goal is to identify any gaps which might currently exist and amend or create new policies which help to ensure the city continues to effectively conserve and protect its heritage resources. This will also include the consolidation of the policies within the regional official plan into our new official plan. As part of this work, a survey has been prepared and is going to be circulated to Heritage Kitchener with a number of different questions on it. Please note that several of our questions are just open-ended. We're looking for this is kind of our brainstorming period where we're looking for any type of ideas or feedback that you might have. So hence the open-ended questions. If you are unsure or don't have a response prepared, please don't feel any pressure to put something down. You can just put NA and move on. But we're really just looking for any type of creative ideas, suggestions, focus areas in this survey. And now Michelle will be covering the next body of work.
The second body of work is the cultural heritage landscape implementation. A bit of a backgrounder for, again, some of our members who are new. Kitchener did prepare a cultural heritage landscape study back in 2014, and it identified 55 cultural heritage landscapes across the city. We have put in place some measures through our official plan to provide general policies that could apply to all CHLs, but then we have also put in place some measures for 2 specific CHLs with more tailored policies to guide change in those areas. And the one area we actually spoke about earlier this evening, was the Cedar Hill Schneider Creek neighborhood cultural heritage landscape, and then the other area that has already been provided some neighborhood-specific policies is our Lower Dune area. So we're looking to move forward with implementation of the study, which was to provide further protection based on provincial and regional, although now municipal, planning guidance. There is an expectation based on policies for us to identify all 55 CHLs within our OP. And so we will be looking to review the existing policies that have been put in place, draft some new policies that may be pertinent to not necessarily an individual landscape, but perhaps a theme like a neighborhood or commercial or parks, for example. And then specifically, we're looking to develop new policies that are specific to up to a maximum of 4 new neighborhoods. And the 4 neighborhoods that we've identified at this point are the Carindale Neighborhood CHL, the Pandora Neighborhood CHL, the Queens Boulevard CHL, and the Rockway Neighborhood CHL. These neighborhood CHLs were selected as they generally represent development eras and architectural styles that are not conserved and protected elsewhere in our city. The review of these neighborhood CHLs will follow a similar process to the previous CHL implementation projects. And so I mentioned Cedar Hill Schneider Creek, that was done as part of the Growing Together work, and Lower Dune was done as part of a broader planning exercise in Lower Dune. Proposed revisions to the existing policy framework, along with drafting of new policies, will be based on best practices, including provincial, regional, and municipal standards and guidelines. And then our last body of work is our Municipal Heritage Register Review Project. This work is scheduled to continue into 2026. It was initiated in 2023 in response to amendments to the Ontario Heritage Act. And there was a time frame set at that time. Initially, our review needed to be completed by December 31st of 2024. That time frame was extended to December 31st of 2026. So we will continue to move forward with implementation of the Municipal Heritage Register Review Project in 2025. We anticipate we will also continue to work on this area in 2026. At present, 91 properties have been reviewed as part of the project, with 41 fully designated, 4 have had or will have notices of intention to designate, and 1 NOID was withdrawn by council. 14 have been reviewed and determined not to meet sufficient criteria, and the rest are in various stages of the review and research process. As previously mentioned by Jessica, there will be a survey that we will be providing to Heritage Kitchener looking for feedback on these 3 areas. So the broader official plan review as it relates to heritage policies, a more targeted review of cultural heritage landscape policies, and then lastly, this body of work related to our municipal heritage register. We ask that you complete the survey over likely the next 2 weeks, but definitely when we send it out, we'll give you a time frame, and then come prepared to discuss and provide further feedback at our April meeting. As a sneak peek, one of the questions that we will be asking about is your interest in helping with the Municipal Heritage Register review work. This is not mandatory, but if you are interested and feel you have a skill set that would contribute to this work, we would welcome your knowledge. So areas where we might be able to use your skill set would be conducting field evaluations, undertaking archival research, potentially completing title searches, writing architectural descriptions, and/or drafting statements of significance. If there's anyone tonight that, as soon as I said that, you were, really excited in your head and want to volunteer, let me know. Otherwise, you can sort of let that sink in and respond as part of the survey that we'll send out at a later time. That concludes our presentation, but the team is available if there are any questions at this point around those 3 areas of work, just recognizing that we're going to seek additional feedback through the survey and have an opportunity for further discussion at the April meeting.
Thank you. And I'll ask if there are any questions for staff. Yes, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you for this. Do you have any documentation on the cultural heritage landscapes that will be shared with us? Or are we starting from scratch?
Through the chair, no, we won't be starting from scratch. So we have the Cultural Heritage Landscape Study that was approved by council back in 2015. That document outlined some next steps, and we have been utilizing those next steps in other projects like Growing Together West and some of the work in Lower Dune. So we'll continue to follow similar processes to implement ways to conserve our cultural heritage landscapes, primarily through our official plan review process, but there are also other tools like heritage districts, individual designations, design guidelines, and so forth.
So all of the relevant documents for these 3 jobs, I'll call them jobs, will be provided to the committee.
Through the chair. So I think to clarify, Councillor Chapman, you're asking about the 4 neighborhoods I mentioned?
Well, I'm talking about the 4 neighborhoods, but also the official plan update. Like, will we be provided with the current official plan so that we have an idea of, and I'm speaking more for, members of the committee, right? So an idea of what the official plan currently looks like, just so that, we're not starting from zero and trying to respond to a survey that we really don't know what it looks like.
Right. So through the chair, the survey was designed to provide direction on documents with links to those documents. And the official plan could be quite scary if you're not familiar with that type of document. And so Jessica has done well in identifying sort of the key areas of the plan that would be best for you to review before you complete the survey. And then similarly, with respect to the cultural heritage landscapes, I've also referenced the sections of those earlier studies that will be most important in your review. To clarify, though, with respect to the 4 neighborhoods I listed, the information that's contained in the original study, we will be doing work to confirm that information, which is what we did in Growing Together West for some of our CHLs, as well as what we did for Lower Dune, for the Lower Dune CHL. And so for those 4 neighborhoods at this point in time, the information we have is found in the study, but there will be additional information that we will gather and then will be provided for comment later before the Heritage Kitchener Committee.
Thank you. Any other questions? Question, the cultural heritage landscape study that was done several years ago and exists, is there background information on each one of these? I do believe there was a checklist of criteria and characteristics and so on. Michelle?
Through the chair, that's correct. So the bulk of the study was the last appendix, which is called the CHL data sheets. And there is a 2-page fold out that describes each of the 55 cultural heritage landscapes. And the criteria include the legislative criteria in terms of Ontario Regulation 906 and the criteria for determining cultural heritage value or interest, but it also includes the criteria established by the Regional of Waterloo in what they called their implementation guideline, where there were additional criteria related to indicators and community values and whether it met those criteria as well. So that work has been done, but it's almost, if we were to zoom out, the study was done at a broad level, and to best conserve each of these individual landscapes, we need to do a bit of finer work to make sure we have the boundary right, to make sure we have the attributes described correctly, and to make sure that it continues to meet the criteria. So that will be what will happen as part of the OP review process for 4 of the neighborhoods. What will happen for the rest of the CHLs will be to bring them into the MAP 9 as it exists today. It might be called something else in the new OP, but bring all of the cultural heritage landscapes into the official plan, which is a directive of other OP policy, and then review the existing CHL policies that generally apply to potentially all landscapes, and then potentially add new policies that might generally apply, or new policies that may specifically apply to those 4 specific neighborhoods I mentioned.
Michelle, you've explained this in depth. And in my experience over the years, with the general public, there is concern or question about what is a cultural heritage landscape. So is it different from a heritage conservation district? So in setting this out for the committee members, and I don't know what the experience of our committee members are or their background information, but is there some place in all this information we're going to share an outline of what a cultural heritage landscape is?
Through the chair, so similar to the question about the background information for the OP, the survey that we'll send out will also include some targeted links to specific sections of the study that will outline what a CHL is and the themes of CHLs that were identified, and then the specific 55 CHLs that were identified as being significant.
Thank you. Any other questions? Just an observation, when I read your work plan with respect to the cultural heritage landscapes, I was very much impressed with the 4 that you have chosen to do: Carindale, Pandora, Queens Boulevard, Rockaway neighborhood. And being familiar with these particular areas, they certainly have, each one has their specific landscape. Carindale has this rural village, what would I say, unsymmetrical, but it's there. It's a specific area and how it came about, a religious community. And then we have Pandora, Queens Boulevard, Rockaway, but each one, they have a certain streetscape and the way the houses are situated and the type of housing on it. There's a theme that if you look and you traverse the area several times, you will start to see a pattern. It represents certain development areas of our city and our community. And although it's low-key architectural style, there is a style there. So I just welcome the committee to have a closer look at these areas. They're outstanding, and I don't know of another city in the region that has these particular areas. So I look forward to this particular work, and especially the cultural heritage landscapes. Are there any other questions or comments? Thank you very much then. Another question. Will this be done in-house, the cultural heritage landscapes? Or are we looking to have more staff at it or what? This is quite a volume of work, in my opinion.
Through the chair, so components of the project will primarily be completed by staff. I am the lead with Deeksha helping and potentially Jessica and potentially our co-op student as well. We usually wrap them into big projects. So there will be a bulk component of our workload will be working on implementation of CHL through official plan policies. As I said, though, it will be scoped to reviewing those existing general policies, perhaps adding to them, and then creating specific policies for up to 4 neighborhoods. And those 4 neighborhoods, as you indicated, were Carindale, Queens, Rockaway, and Pandora. We are looking to retain a consultant to assist in, I guess, what I would maybe call our field evaluation work. But the way we've structured the work is that we will then get that raw data, and staff will be analyzing that data and making recommendations around boundaries and heritage attributes and policies that should be put in place to protect those heritage attributes.
Another item that might come up and perhaps cause a little bit of turmoil. If, in fact, perhaps somebody is watching our presentation today and they hear this, they hear, oh, we're going to have a cultural landscape for our area. I'm just wondering, is there any intent to communicate with maybe the neighborhood leaders or community neighbors and perhaps with the counselors who are going to be involved?
Through the chair, absolutely. So there is a broader public consultation, public engagement process outlined for the broader official plan review process. We will be aligning with some of their engagement opportunities, but we also feel that it's important to have some of our own targeted engagement opportunities. So this survey to Heritage Kitchener is sort of just a first opportunity for engagement, but we would envision that there would be, particularly with the neighborhoods, we would likely envision that there would either be like a collective open house or similar engagement type opportunity, either for the neighborhoods altogether or perhaps for each individual. Those are details we haven't quite finalized, but absolutely there would be the intent to reach out to the ward councillor, to reach out to the respective neighborhood associations if they do exist for those particular for those 4 particular neighborhoods, and then a targeted engagement for those 4 particular neighborhoods. Otherwise, the remaining CHL work will be at that higher level because the 55 landscapes are across the city as a whole.
Thank you, Michelle. And I do like the idea of an open house with general information and working from the open house with the beginning statements and pictures and so on. And, you know, just what is a cultural heritage landscape. So thank you. Are there any other questions for staff? All right. So we heard the marching orders. I wonder if there's any more, any other comments on the work plan? Thank you. And we'll go to 5.2 Heritage Permit Application Tracking Sheet. Are there any questions on that? Thank you. So who would like to adjourn the meeting?